2024 is seen as a rebuilding year for the Michigan Wolverines. While this might be true, it is also true to me and a number of college football fans across the board that Michigan will also compete for a Big Ten title, double digit wins, and to play in a spot in the college football playoff while still in a rebuilding, or you could call it a retooling year. I explain this and a lot more on this episode of the Big Ten Quick Talk podcast. If you have not already subscribed to the channel below, it really helps us out. I appreciate it if you would do that right now. Give this video a like and comment your thoughts on Michigan football down below. This episode, this preview, will run around 15 minutes long, and I will dedicate half the video roughly to the roster and how I see that, and to a schedule breakdown. So let's get right into it. So here's my roster preview. We will look at the potential strengths and potential weaknesses after I go over the offense and defense respectively, with one impact transfer on both sides of the ball. On offense, at the quarterback position, I gave that position a B, pretty much because of the unprovenness of this room. This room does not have any proven material back to it. Alex Orji, the presumed starter, looks pretty good in the spring game and is a true dual threat quarterback at the position. But we can't go any higher than B because we don't know. I will talk about this with Nebraska with Dylan Raiola. I can't go higher than a B at this position because he does not have the experience. The same goes with Alex Orji. At running back, I have an A. Donovan Edwards, I think, is one of the best running backs in the game right now. He's up there. I think he's in my top 5, definitely in my top 10 running backs coming into this year in college football. Enough said there. At wide receiver and tight end, here's where I could have split the room, split this grade into wide receiver and tight end, because at tight end they have an A in Colston Loveland, the only returning starter on that offensive line, on the offense, as a whole, and he was a really key piece in winning that national championship last year, as they used him quite a lot, and they will continue to use him as probably the number one target next year, this coming year. But with the wide receivers, it's a different story. Samaj Morgan, Tyler Morris, and Frederick Moore highlight this room, and nothing jumps out to me here. When it comes to the Michigan Wolverines, there's not a whole lot of experience in this room. All three of them returned from last year as backups, and we'll see how they play out. But Michigan's room wasn't strong to begin with last year, and they lost their top 2 targets last year, and I think Johnson and Roman Wilson. And it's going to be hard to replace that type of production that they were getting there, especially because they don't. It's not that they don't throw it to their wide receivers; they just don't throw it to their wide receivers like a pass-heavy offense would be. So I expect them to lean on their run game a lot more because of this wide receiver room. On offensive line, I have a B. This offensive line all comes back from last year's team. They were just the backups because everyone on that offensive line left. And they did get a transfer here. This is where we'll talk about our impact transfer, Josh Prebe. Prebe transferred in from Northwestern. He took over 700 snaps last year, 760 snaps to be precise. He's a 6'5", 310-pound guy at guard, and I think he will help anchor this position and really bring some clarity to the offensive line, because everyone else on this offensive line at tackle with Miles Hilton and Andrew Gentry, and at center with Greg Crippen, supposedly, excuse me, these guys, they're all, again, they come through the same system. So I trust this system a lot more than any other system, possibly besides Georgia's, in all of college football when it comes to developing the offensive line. So I don't doubt that they won't be good. But this offensive line will not be a great offensive line. It will not be an elite offensive line. If they can get their offensive line to be good to very good, I think that would be successful for the Wolverines, especially going into the next year, the 2025 year. On the defensive side of the ball, I have their defensive line as an A minus. They bring back both of their interior defensive linemen in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, both players that could go 1-2 at the interior defensive line position in the next year's draft, NFL draft, because they're just that talented at the interior position. And they played last year on that vaunted defense, and they thrived on that vaunted defense. But that is pretty much it for the experience on this defensive line. So it's not a complete A because there are other players on this defensive line. They're just not the type of caliber players as Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are. At linebacker, I'm really high on this linebacking core as we highlight the impact transfer on defense in Jay Barham that they got from Maryland. Ultra aggressive, physical, fast linebacker that played for the Terrapins last year. And he has room to grow, which is great. He has the raw talent. I think that he could be one of the best players on this defense, a splash playmaker type of guy. And I think that he'll perform really well as their one of their only additions, excuse me, on the defensive side of the ball. Ernest Hausman, I think, will break through as a linebacker. Same deal with him. Uber talented, and he took last year and he played in all the games, but he also learned on the sideline as well because he didn't start. And I think that learning will really help him progress into a starter this year. And at the other linebacker position, Derek Moore, I think, will do pretty good. Josiah Stewart, I'm high on him as well. And I'm really high on this linebacker core in general. But with the lack of experience, true experience, as they lose a lot from last year, I have that as a B plus. In the secondary, I have a B plus as well. Losing Rod Moore definitely hurt. He was going to lead that secondary into possibly, if he's on this secondary, one of the best secondaries in college football. But we have to deal with the fact that they lost their number one guy, and this room will be led by Will Johnson and Quentin Johnson and Makari Page, Derek Moore, all these sorts of players will have to take a step up and be a leader. And these players are not bad players. Will Johnson, he is a stud. I think Makari Page could be a stud at strong safety. Jair Hill is going to be pretty good. Quentin Johnston at free safety is going to be good. But these players, again, we talk about the experience. They lost so much from last year that I can't trust their secondary enough without Rod Moore to be an elite secondary for now. That's subject to change. And I really think that this secondary has a higher ceiling, but I think it also it has a lower floor than a lot of other rooms on this roster. So we'll go through these really quickly. The potential strengths, running back and tight end, I think are pretty self-explanatory. The linebacker room, again, I'm high on this linebacker room. Jay Barham and Ernest Hausman, I think, will be very, very good linebackers. Now we go to potential weaknesses. Wide receiver, I think that's pretty well documented. Quarterback, I think this offense is going to hinge on Alex Orji being competent. If Alex Orji turns into Jeff Sims like last year with Nebraska, it's not going to be very good. But if he turns out to be a more than capable guy, I think that he will have pretty darn good success. But this could be a weakness. I don't see him being anything more than a competent quarterback. I think that he has a lower ceiling and a lower floor as well. If you get the analogy, I think that he could be more of a weakness than he could be a strength. So he's here at potential weakness, and then, excuse me, at my final potential weakness, I have the offensive line. Pretty much just because of the inexperience, though I do like the players that they have and the player that they brought in Josh Priebe. Now here's my Michigan Wolverines schedule breakdown. Notice this is not a prediction. The prediction part will come later in the month of July, bleeding into the month of August, and those will be great in their own right. But this is a schedule breakdown. As I go through the schedule and the games, I will color code them just to give you a visual for what I think this Michigan schedule could break down to be. In games where I think Michigan will have a 0 to 30% chance of winning, as we go through those, if there are any, I will put those in orange. Pick'em games, that's pretty self-explanatory. That'll be in the navy. Games that I think Michigan has a 60 to 80% chance of winning, I will put in the purple. And then a certified win, basically 80 to 100% chance of winning, I put in the Big Ten blue. So, like I hinted at, there are no games on Michigan's schedule that I think that they have a 0 to 30% chance of winning. So we go to the certified win category in the lighter blue color when Michigan plays host to Fresno State, Arkansas State, Minnesota, and Northwestern, and then they travel to Indiana. These 5 games I think are going to be certified wins. Fresno State, a tougher G5 opponent, but it's Michigan, and it's the big house in week one. I think that Michigan will trample Fresno State. Same with Arkansas State as well, especially if they lose to Texas. They'll want to take out all their wrath on Arkansas State. That game could be a bloodbath. Versus Minnesota. I'm not high on Minnesota this year, as we'll get to later on in my season preview series. I'm not high on Minnesota. At Indiana, Indiana, the very true sense of a rebuilding program, very much not like Michigan this year, where Michigan's rebuilding and they'll still win at least a couple games. I don't think Indiana will even win a couple games, if any. But again, a comment for a later date. And then versus Northwestern. Northwestern will be a tough opponent this year, but this is a game on the back half of the schedule. Michigan will be a well-oiled machine by then, and I think that game will be out of reach for Northwestern. So these 5 games for me are games that Michigan will 100% win, in my opinion. Next, we move to the category that I think Michigan will be favored by 60 to 80% versus USC in week 4. I went back and forth on this game. This could have been a pick'em game, in my opinion, but I decided on about a 60-40 lean Michigan. I think Michigan is just going to be a better team than USC, and I think that plays itself out in the big house. At Washington, Washington is a team that I think will be better than the record says they are. Giving a little bit of a preview here for Washington, but they just don't have the team and the schedule to prove that they'll be a capable team this year, in my opinion. So I think Michigan will win that one by 3 touchdowns, something like that. So I'd put that one more at 75% Michigan. At Illinois, this one could have been a certified win. I'm honestly not high on Illinois at all, but this game being played in Champaign helps Illinois out. And but I still expect Michigan to win this one. First, Michigan State. Michigan State, a team that I think has a chance because they have a quarterback. If you have a quarterback, you have a chance, in my opinion. Even if there's not a whole lot around that quarterback, which is Michigan State right now. Michigan, I think, will beat their rival Michigan State pretty readily, in my opinion. But still, I think Michigan State has a chance in this game. Last but not least, the pick'em part of the schedule. I have versus Texas, versus Oregon, and at Ohio State. Honestly, I expect them to win at least 1 out of 3 here. If we're being optimistic, 2 out of 3. But I don't think that they're winning 3 out of these 3 games here at Ohio State. This is the game. I am this year. I am just really uncertain that Michigan will win in this matchup. But we'll go over matchups at a later date in July or August versus Oregon. That will be a heck of a matchup between Dan Lanning and Sharon Moore. And then versus Texas, I think this might define their college football playoff chances. If they lose this game, I am really unsure if they make the college football playoff or not, depending on how they lose. If they win this game, I think that by the end of the season, that Texas win will look very good on their resume. And if they were to go 9-3 or 10-2, I think that they would get the benefit of the doubt over a lot of other 9-3, 10-2 teams because they beat Texas. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Comment your thoughts down below on the schedule or the roster. I really like to see those. As always, subscribe to the channel. The best and most efficient way to support the podcast is by subscribing, and like the video as well if you enjoyed it. And that's all for me, and I will see you guys in the next one.